Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Project Catalyst podcast and Vodcast series with me, Kim Clyden. Could trace elements provide further productivity gains for farmers focusing on soil health? As farmers all over the world continue seeking new ideas to simplify their systems and renew the landscape, Project Catalyst grower Tony Jeppesen embraces opportunities to share his knowledge and inspire change. Tony's practice change adoption is ever evolving. As he forges a path to improve both soil and plant health, nothing is out of consideration. Tony, it's been a while since we spoke. What's been happening since your movement into multi-species cover crops and a bigger focus on your soil?
We went down the cropping road in a pretty fair way. So we purchased a header, we purchased our silo, with room for a second one. We've always got to be positive, and we've got a new planter, so we've really been focusing a lot on our cropping component in our operation, and we've had some mixed results from that. We've had some really good crops, we've had some learned some lessons with diseases and things we weren't even aware of, but it's been a big learning curve. Yes, some fusarium wilt nearly wiped out a mung crop we had, which was interesting because they hadn't been around here before. But it's always a lesson, but it's been great. It's been a big positive for us moving forward as a business. Our fallow system, we take our cane out when the crushing starts, so as early as possible around July. Because for our organic carbon, we're trying to pour as much biomass into the ground as we possibly can to improve our soil structure. So we try and do, say, a crop of mung bean early, and then as a winter crop, and say we'll do a crop of soybean as a summer crop. We do very minimal tillage on the farm, very, very minimal. So we were looking at going zero tillage between our mung bean and our soybean. It all planted good, everything was really good, but for some reason we had this massive uptake of feathertop roads came on that typically in that scenario you would just do a Roundup spray, which we actually try and cut back as much of that as we possibly can anyway, but we wanted to trial the zero tillage through them, which we've done before plenty of times. And we just had this huge crop and it got hit with a good hit of Roundup and it just went greener. And it shocked me. I've never seen so much resistance we don't have much feathertop here anyway. Where it came from, how it happened, I don't really know. And so it was an eye-opener. And so we quickly decided we weren't doing any more zero tillage between those crops. And we actually worked with a company up at Ingham agencies and have an implement now that we run through just once between those crops to bury that biomass and make sure there's no residual plants in that ground at all. And then we're planting straight behind it. So it's only a small period where it's left bare, but it's not uncommon to head it the next day. We will actually put the renovator through and then we will plant our next crop pretty soon after it. We're not interested in holding the crop to chase a better price. That's a weather related factor. So the silo is there there's a rain event coming. We perceived when we looked at the business case for this was we needed the ability to take that seed off when we had to and store it when we had to. And that has already happened with a mung crop from a few years ago where we managed to put about 100 tonne in that silo because there was a rain event coming and it protected it. If we didn't have the silo, we would have lost it and didn't have our own header. We would have lost at, I think it was $13.50 a tonne. So yeah, it was lucky we had that infrastructure.
Rain's one of the biggest challenges we face here in the tropics. Obviously we get very heavy rain events and it's difficult to mitigate for all of that. But what is your approach to the water that comes across your farm?
Managing water is probably my biggest thought process I go through is making sure that we don't have any off-site negative impacts. So we've spent a lot of time designing the farm, getting our drainage right, making sure that our drains are level, flat, so we're spreading the water. We're trying to reduce any chance of water creating any like a velocity point where it actually starts chewing out. So in other words, when we do a large drain, we try to keep it flat grade. We treat water as energy. We do not want any ability for that water to speed up. If it speeds up, if we drop it down to harder grade, it might speed up. That creates energy. We've got to dispel that energy. And usually to do that, you'll create a point where it might chew out part of that drain. On the opposite side, if you slow the water down, obviously you'll drop particles out of that water because the velocity of water changes, so they'll have the ability to drop out, and then the drain starts filling up and you'll have side movement. So the design of the drain network is just as important as the paddock network and the wetlands and all the other associated parts of it, and our exit points into our river system. So you can't just look at one thing and say laser a paddock and think that's all good, that's done. You've got to think of all those components where it's on your land until you put it back in the watercourse.
It sounds like you've got a lot of knowledge around water and its movement. How did you come to this point of amassing all of that understanding of water?
Well, that's a long story because it started back when we bought this property back in 2002. We realised that we had to gain a lot of knowledge very quickly. So I actually put myself up for member of Cane Growers Board back when I was only a pretty young pup. A long time ago now. And from that, my interest is mainly on environment and water. So within a pretty short time, I was then chair of water sufficiency, and I was also the chairman of the environmental management systems in sugar, because basically none of the farmers on the board who had a few more mango seasons on me weren't interested in that sort of areas. So it was great for me. And from that, the networks I created, the people I met, the engineers, the experts, the agronomists who are always experts in that field, that just bringing all that information in, that's what created the interest, and that's what I relied on, all that knowledge, to then develop our farm plans to get to where we are now, which has taken 20 years or more. Actually, you can go back to the early days of Catalyst, when I think I had to present originally at Airlie Beach from memory. That one I forgot about. They had some expert agronomists from South Africa. WWF brought them over from memory, and so you can go right back to that, talking to those sort of experts, going through to spending time and doing courses with engineers, Mishko and a few others. But there's been other things over the years that obviously I've attended that it's just knowledge building. So I've got no PhD or anything like that. There's no formal education, but it's hands-on, learning it, studying it, and then implementing those ideas. And also, one of our businesses is actually focused wholly on doing that with our excavators and the work we do for NRM groups in rivers and watercourses in our area, doing that sort of work. So it's a real hands-on understanding flows, especially when you're putting, say, some pylons in the O'Connell or something, because you're losing tens of thousands of metres of sediment from a point. I'm very lucky to be able to do that sort of work and actually fix up those big issues through that contractor company. So that not just the farm, it's also our contracting and all else. So live and breathe the stuff basically.
We could tell that today because you had about 25 people here at your farm checking out some of the sites that we went to, as well as a presentation that you did this morning. And it was really interesting to me that you could actually break down what your knowledge is, which is quite a high level, and convey that to them in such a simplistic way. Why is it important for other people to understand what you know?
Because hopefully they'll take it to their own properties. It's one thing to have a chat about something and explain stuff in a board, but to give the background in a farmer viewpoint, because I'm through and through just a farmer, to then take them and show them the reasonings why I can't have that drain with a big drop off there, or I can't do this, I can't do that, and actually show them. And it was very lucky today to a degree, because we've had 125 mil down in that part of the farm where we went down to, and we just took 25 cars down there, whatever, drove down there. There was no water laying anywhere. There was no dirty water. There was no erosion. There was no nothing. And we had 5 inches in, an hour or something. So it was actually the best day ever to go down and show someone, and show a group of farmers, agronomists, like-minded people and the rest, when you've just had a rain event like that, and you can just drive a ute down and two-wheel drive, and it was a great day for that.
Soil conservation consultant John Day was here to share his extensive knowledge of Tony's soil types and profiles with a captivated audience.
You might get a bit of change in pH, or oftentimes salinity levels will get high in a brigalow clay at depth. But some of these duplex soils, they often have impediments to root growth fairly high up in the profiles. And that can be pH, it can be structure, or it can be just acidity, salinity, compaction, yeah.
Tony, we talked about all the experts you've learnt from over the years. What was it like for you to have John Day here analysing your soil in front of an audience?
It's a bit scary because you never know what sort of things he'd say. But so we dug a little hole for him, a trench, so we could go through the profile, because he obviously did tests and pH tests and all the rest of it. And that goes down why we're here with healthy water, healthy soils today, was when we were talking about how we managed to get our organic carbon up levels, a lot higher levels than we started with years ago. And we talked about our pH, how we're building that as well, and we need to. And then here's a big expert comes down and does it in the paddock and tests our pH, and it was good, yeah. No, and it was good to know, to actually, everything he said made me feel pretty good, yeah. And actually, I learned more when we were in here having a little quiet chat together, because you can, very open with questioning, and his knowledge of the different layers of the soil and the clays and the structures. We've spent so long focusing on the top bit of soil, where he's really focusing on our clay lines and what's beneath that. So, and that does sort of go along with the way the site that he went to today was, where we put mud down, mill mud. We apply probably 300 or 400 mil below the surface. We're interested in getting it down there. And we've done that for quite a few years. So I think a lot of our farming systems, it's good when an expert comes and he says, yep, Jeppy, that's great. This is, wow, your clay's at, what do you say, six or something pH, and this is really good. And yeah, so it's a long time to get those changes in our soil structures. And we're seeing that in our crop production levels and the tonnages we're getting off it. But it's lovely to have someone who's an expert come in and say, yep, that's pretty good.
You're talking about focusing on your trace elements. You're then investing in other inputs like minerals, and today you're talking about calcium and boron and those sorts of things. So what are you focused on putting back into your soils now when you move away from so much nitrogen application?
It's always dynamic farming. So we think we have big issues and we focus on them, like our soil, and you actually start winning. But then obviously there's other issues you've got to look at, and it's an understanding of that. And because of some of the different cropping we were doing and the trace element requirements for those, and the cross-reference into the cane. So it's really important to get that understanding of those trace elements. So now we're starting a few projects with Sugar Services Prossy to actually look closer into that. Before we were applying a bit willy-nilly those sort of trace elements. We need the science behind that, so hopefully we can start doing a lot more work in that area. We think that's probably our next area of quite big productivity gains, by fine-tuning those areas, which will hopefully fix up our ability to access a lot of our stored nutrients in the soil, to allow us to drop our synthetics down a bit, is by going down and really analysing our trace element requirements and what that plant is actually using. Most of the work we're doing now is through foliar spraying in our trace elements through the crop cycle, but understanding exactly what our soils are lacking. Or it's not even always lacking, because sometimes it's there, but the plant isn't healthy enough to uptake that, or there's other restrictions that stop that ability. So we're going down a road now of increasing our knowledge base in that area, and that's probably our focus right now. And hopefully by doing a lot more leaf sampling this year, that's the way I've always found the best way to gain that knowledge, is actually actively, so we'll do a heap more leaf samples focused on those trace elements, work out which trace elements are there according to the soil test, but work out which ones plants are using. And it's just going to be a knowledge gain from where we're at, the level we're at now, which is pretty low in that area. I remember our first rice crop 6-7 years ago, that we did some foliar applications in that, and it's basically been building up the knowledge base through our cropping activities, because we use a lot of boron, zinc, moly in that cropping, and we do a lot of applications, multiple applications, to use those traces to actually get our crops. If there's big rain event, it gives the plant a massive kick, but we see the results from what's left over in our cane crops. So it's been the last 5, 6, 7 years or something of the amount of trace elements we're using in our cropping is actually teaching us a lot of lessons about the cane, and we never really correlated it back to the cane as much as we should have 6-7 years ago. So now we're really wanting to move it into the cane because of the results we're getting into the cropping. That's the beauty about cropping. It's a lot more intense than the sugarcane farm side of things. You've got to be much more on the ball, and it's teaching us to be better farmers because it's the little things are making a big difference in that side of the business. So that's, yeah, it's exciting. And yeah, so that's the correlation between the cropping. You push yourself into another area and then you learn lessons that you can then spread to the rest of your business.
Considering the focus on soil health now, what impact has that had on the types of chemicals you're having to use?
Regulations wise and that, we made a decision to drop a lot of chemicals off our operation 3 years ago, I think it was. We dropped any Diron, atrazine, Valpars, those sort of chemicals, we actually stopped using. So we had to use other chemicals. We were very aware of our riparian areas, our waterways. So all of a sudden we've dropped out big chunk of our arsenal we used to have. So using a lot softer chemicals, it allows us, it's obviously improved our cropping side because for that side of it, but there's a lot of challenges there. They aren't as, well, obviously they're not as active and they can't handle big rain events as much. So we're learning a lot of lessons now with those chemicals, and that's we've had Diron for I don't know how many years, so we learned, obviously we knew the tricks of the trade with that. Now we're starting off with a whole new chemical, a whole new line of chemicals. So it's a pretty hard learning curve, and yeah, hopefully over time we'll get it right. But I mean, in the end, we did it for absolute reasons. One, health of our soils. Two, our waterways. There's a lot of reasons why we decide to do that, but it's easy to say you'll do it, but it's just the ramifications of that decision aren't always apparent straight away. It might be a few years down the track till you get different climatic conditions and you realise that those chemicals just aren't capable of what you were hoping they would be. Now we're focusing on really trying to get our riparian areas right. Now, we've done a lot of re-veg work over the last 20 years with reef catchments in Mackay. Some of these areas have so much biomass of grass built up over the wet seasons that whenever you put a fire through, every little tree under about 8 foot high is dead. It just burns them. The trouble is the 100, 200 trees, whatever they're, the big trees that are 5-6 foot round, every time a fire goes through, you might lose another 1 or 2 of them as well. So eventually now all that riparian area is slowly losing its vegetation. And it's just being replaced by hamel grass, skinny grass, and those big, quick producing biomass plants. We can't re-veg in the typical sense those areas, because to do 30 hectares or 40 hectares, that's just, no, it can't happen. So what we're trying to do is reduce that biomass so that no fires ever go near there. We're not burning it anymore. If we don't burn it, we won't lose little trees. Little trees still can't get up there because the biomass is so thick. So we're trying to incorporate a grazing system where we quickly put the cattle in the dry just to get the biomass down without doing any damage to our riparian areas, without making tracks. So it's just a quick hit, a lot of numbers, bang, get them out. And hopefully then when the wet season comes and there's hopefully the birds will bring the seeds in and it'll all be natural, and we're sure it will. So we're just starting that project hopefully this year. We'll do our first 30 hectare area. We'll fence off and just bring cattle in quickly, and yeah, and hopefully that should work. We're very confident we will have success. There'll be a way to manage big areas easily and cost effectively.
You've implemented so many new systems and so much design now into your farm. Where to from here?
Well, that's probably the focus is going in the trace elements to really start fine-tuning and understand that. So that's a couple of projects hopefully going with that. So that's going to take a fair bit of time. My son's decided he wants to be a farmer, which is interesting. He'll be a 5th generation. So that's exciting. So we've got to start planning for that side of it, which is always an interesting scenario when generational transfer of the farm over has obviously got some issues. So there's plenty of stuff to do, plenty of work to do, and just keep improving what we're doing, because everything we do, we can do better. Nothing we do is right. Everything we can do better, and that's the mindset we always have had and always will have. So there's always, we can fine tune everything. So there's still tons more to do. And I try and make it clear to everyone who comes here that what I do is not right. I mean, there's always, as I said, you can always do it better. But hopefully, as I've done over the years of going to Project Catalyst meetings and farms, I'll grab a bit from that farm, a bit from that farm, and little bits all over the place for many years, and it's all helpful. So, yeah, hopefully, people will get little bits out of it, and everyone's always welcome.
If you've enjoyed listening to this vodcast today or watching Tony's story, make sure you join us on our social platforms: Facebook, our website projectcatalyst.net.au, and on YouTube, where you'll see more stories and podcasts just like this one. Project Catalyst is funded by the partnership between the Australian Government's Reef Trust and the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, and the Coca-Cola Foundation, with support from WWF Australia.